Good evening all. The European Union, in or out? A personal point of view. For some considerable time now, we have been inundated with daily commentary regarding David Cameron's efforts to negotiate a reformation of the European Union. However, I note, in all that debate, no one has given specific attention to the European Commission, which has metamorphosed into a monstrous oligarchy, which can only be viewed as a third world organisation manned by second-hand politicians who exercise executive power without being accountable to the electorate. The European Commission is not only undemocratic, it is anti-democratic. You and I cannot, however much we may wish to, remove any European Commissioner who may be idle, inept, incompetent, corrupt, or any possible combination of these four characteristics by popular vote. In 1975, I genuinely believe that I was voting for an association of sovereign states in a customs union. After all, what we were voting for was called the European Economic Community. Nothing was said about the mission creep of ever closer union. Thus the whole project began by deceit, and all subsequent treaties were imposed upon us as a nation without the consultation or consent of the proletariat. What I fail to understand is why our so-called leaders, who populate the Westminster bubble, refuse to acknowledge this fatal flaw in the European construct. Have they no concept that for many of us, to be governed by this unelected oligarchy is extremely offensive? Because David Cameron has not based his negotiations upon the establishment of electoral accountability above all else, his efforts in pursuit of reformation of the European Union can only be considered a futile waste of time. The question to be put to the British people is really about sovereignty. Who governs? Can we pass our own laws, raise our own taxes, trade with whomever we wish, fish our own waters, allow into the country those whom we choose to come, and remove those who we do not want? If we were an independent nation, we could do all those things, but as a member of the European Union, we are not at liberty to do this, as these affairs are directed and controlled by the European Commission. We need to remember, because the 1972 European Communities Act and the subsequent treaties ratified by Parliament surrendered these powers to the European Union, the primacy of European law will be upheld for as long as the European Communities Act remains on the statute book. In the Commons last week, 1st to the 5th of February, Boris Johnson asked the Prime Minister how the changes resulting from the negotiations will restrict the volume of legislation coming from Brussels and change the treaties so as to assert sovereignty of this House of Commons and these Houses of Parliament. The Prime Minister replied, "I am keen to do even more to put it beyond doubt that this House of Commons is sovereign. We will look to do that at the same time as concluding negotiations." My reaction to that statement is balderdash. Downing Street has indicated there will be a sovereignty bill, probably accompanied by a British Bill of Rights and some form of constitutional court. That intent is all bream bait and breadcrumbs, just so much window dressing. Will a sovereignty bill make any difference to the current situation? I think not. It could put us onto the same footing with other European countries with constitutional courts. But the Czech Republic's senior court is the only court to have ever used the power to declare a European law invalid. The power to rule on European law is invested in our Supreme Court, but taking cognizance of the 1972 European Communities Act, it is highly unlikely to exercise that function. And why would it do so when Parliament has decreed in statute that European law takes precedent? Since Parliament is sovereign, that is the constitutional position until it decides to strike the law from the statute book. Europe has been undermining our independence since the 1970s. Consider, the Lisbon Treaty brought justice and home affairs into the jurisdiction of the European Commission, and the European Court of Justice, as far back as 1990, was able to demonstrate its ability to overrule an Act of Parliament when it handed down a judgment on the Factortame case that breached European law. There is only one way we can regain control of our own affairs and reassert our independence as a nation. Vote to leave.